the NVIDIA CEO, announced plans to invest £2 billion in the UK's AI industry. One beneficiary is Basecamp Research. The London and Boston-based AI biotech firm has raised over $85 million and has created what it describes as the world's biggest database of biological data in the world. The company uses the data to design proteins with the potential to develop new medicines. Joining me now is Glen Gowers, co-founder and CEO of Basecamp Research. Glen, thanks for coming to the studio bright and early. So you have this backing from NVIDIA. You guys seem to be doing something that is out of the box in terms of collecting data that hasn't been collected before, but also building your own models with potential significant impacts for therapeutics. Just briefly explain what it is, what the proposition is. What are you guys doing, just briefly, and how it sets you apart?
Of course. We're building curative therapeutics, and this is really a new era for medicine. We've been in the era of small molecules to now biologics, where we are today, and the future really is the ability to design cures from scratch, knowing what's wrong with the patient and designing interventions. This requires AI and huge foundation models that understand how to read, how to write DNA, how to design these interventions. And this is an incredibly complex process. We need entirely new models and therefore entirely new data sets to support those models built from scratch. That's what we've been doing.
Is Big Pharma's not already doing this?
Not at all. No, they are, of course, doing work in curative cell and gene therapies, but hampered by many different problems, from the costs to the lack of predictability to the kind of length of time it takes to develop these therapeutics. And this is exactly what we think and are proving that AI can have a huge impact in.
So you have more than 10 billion novel protein sequences. What is practically involved in collecting that data?
Sure, it's actually 12 billion proteins that we have now. We're growing very, very rapidly. In collecting that data, we have to go to its source. We need to map all of evolution, where it lies. This is soil, air, water, in 28 countries around the planet, 5 continents, and that's where we're working on the ground.
That sounds incredibly labour-intensive.
It is incredibly labour-intensive, yeah. It's taken us 5 years to build this with the investments of $85 million to this date to build this foundational data set, but the need couldn't be greater and the importance couldn't be larger.
And you're looking specifically to address a gap when it comes to more complex genetic diseases that maybe Big Pharma and other drug companies aren't meeting right now for all sorts of various complex reasons. How much progress have you made? What kind of timeframes should we be thinking about in terms of actually getting a drug to market based on the kind of work that you and the team are doing?
Sure, of course. One of the core technologies we're working on is programmable gene insertion, the ability to edit the genome very rapidly in very precise ways. To give some example of how long this could take to develop, even today there was an example recently, a baby called baby KJ. It took 9 months from diagnosing the patient with a genetic disease to designing an intervention to cure that disease in that 9-month period. And that's with today's technology. I think we can get that down to perhaps even a single handful of months, maybe even 3 months.
And to be clear, in terms of when we start to see drugs on the market, is this a this decade story, before 2030, that we start to see drugs on the market that are based on your models and your data sets?
I absolutely believe within a decade we'll see that.
Yeah, okay, and we have to have regulators to work through that in terms of clinical trials. What about partnerships with Big Pharma? What is your relationship with the kind of AstraZenecas and GSKs of the world?
Yeah, of course, we're in active discussions with many of the large pharma companies, precisely for this reason that they want to move into cures. You know, we don't want to be treating symptoms of diseases, we really want to be treating underlying causes, and that's really at the foundation of the entire pharmaceutical industry. And so we're in active discussions with many of them.
On the commercial side, where are you seeing the strongest potential commercial uptake of some of these solutions?
Yeah, particularly around cell therapies and gene therapies. And these are incredibly complex medicines, both from the design and the manufacturing. And this is really where we have the largest benefit today in both of those.
And how do you turn this kind of into revenue at scale for the business?
Yeah, we're talking about medicines. We're talking about cures that treat people from diseases and make them unreliant on healthcare systems, etc. And so the commercial demand for this is incredibly high from all of these different patient groups around the world, which many of them today have no cures, no treatments for, and really tens of thousands of genetic diseases and cell therapy. These are things we want to work on.
How much of a headwind is ethics and privacy when it comes to data in different jurisdictions? You're traveling all over the world. You have teams collecting all this data in different regions. How do you navigate that complexity?
Yeah, of course. We need to map the provenance of all of this data and have access and benefit-sharing partnerships negotiated with every country that we work on. This is actually something that we have pioneered. We do a lot of work with various different groups at the UN to demonstrate that this is possible at scale. Mm-hmm. You can build these partnerships with governments and institutions around the world where we can gain this data and, in return, share benefits of the commercialization of that data.
And NVIDIA has invested, is that right? they have backed you. Is that right? Or the process
we have collaborations with NVIDIA at the moment, and of course with that announcement back in a few different months ago.
Okay.
Yes,
How important is that support?
Incredibly important, that support, because we are training enormous models on all of this data that we have here. That is not a simple task. And of course, we're a team of 50 people based between London and Boston. We benefit from working with the best companies in the world in scaling those models on the technical side.
Is the UK benefiting from a brain drain from the US when it comes to research and science to the UK? Are you seeing that?
We're certainly seeing a great depth of talent in the UK, specifically around applied AI, and that's really because of the depth of the academic talent we have here. We do see a good fluidity between the US and the UK. Of course, we hire from both of those geographies, in addition to many others, and really seeing the UK going from strength to strength in this matter.
And the government's doing enough to support your business and others like it in the ecosystem?
They're doing a good job, certainly with that announcement with NVIDIA and having Keir Starmer on stage sharing that announcement.
There's more they can do.
There's certainly more than they can do here, and I think we are really just in the foothills of the potential of AI in this industry, and the UK, with our academic depth that we have here with top universities, there's a long way that we can go in terms of...
Glen Gowers, thank you very much indeed. Co-founder and CEO of Basecamp Research. Really fascinating in terms of the work that's being done there.